Hey guys, my name is Naguura, and today I'm going to talk about the MDI. So, in case you don't know, the MDI is the Mythic Dungeon International, so a 5 versus 5 dungeon speedrun competition organized by Blizzard. I personally participated in the very first MDI, and now I'm casting the MDI. First of all, I just wanted to say that I wrote a really long script about this, so I'm going to be reading off the script a lot because I don't want to start rambling because I have a lot of thoughts about the MDI, and if I'm not going to read off the script, then I'm just going to be talking and it's going to be a 50-minute video. So excuse me for doing that, but I wrote the scripts and this is, all my thoughts and everything. I'm just doing it to not, talk about whatever. So anyway, basically thinking that lots of people have concerns and ideas for the MDI. And I saw some very interesting ideas for format changes. So I figured I'm going to just create a video, include all my thoughts about it and the ideas that I have, because lots of people have been, talking about it on Twitter, talking about it on stream chats and so on. And lots of people also decided to not participate in the MDI anymore because of different kinds of issues. So I figured that it would be good to address all of this stuff. All right, so first of all, I want to take a look at the different parties that are interested in the MDI and how to please each of the parties and what kind of concerns they have respectively. I'm basically going to list 3 parties. First, the players. The players' concerns are mainly that the time investment for practicing and the tournaments is too high compared to the prize pool that they can win. And a second concern I thought the players have is that there's no real way of practicing on live servers, as all the live keys experience doesn't really carry over to the MDI format. So they always just have to practice on the tournament realm, and all the live key practice is kind of useless. There's lots of teams who actually just don't even play at all on live servers, and I think that's a little bit weird when the MDI is a Mythic Plus competition, but live keys are completely disconnected. I think that's just a problem, right? Now, let's talk about the second party that is interested in the MDI, the viewers, right? Now, the viewers have lots of concerns. First of all, the repetitiveness of classes, strategies, and dungeons. Lots of people, get bored if they see the same comp all the time, if they see the same runs all the time, and so on. Then, a lot of times the dungeons are really one-sided after a major mistake by one of the teams. And it's kind of boring to watch unless the other team makes a mistake as well, which is usually unlikely, especially if the mistake of the first team was like a huge mistake, like a wipe on a boss or whatever. And then a viewer's own experience in Mythic Plus on live servers will be very different to what they see in the MDI. So this creates a bunch of issues in my opinion. First of all, the viewers don't really know how complex a pool is that the teams are doing because they can't really relate to it, right? Like if you see an MDI team pull like half of hulls of a tournament together and then just AoE it down, it looks like so simple when they execute it well, the teams. Like they just gather everything up and they stun it and they AoE it down, right? So it looks simple, but of course this is incredibly complicated. This complexity just doesn't carry over to the viewer, in my opinion, because they are not doing such pulls. They don't know how difficult this is. They have never even attempted such a pull, and they also don't have the capability of attempting it because of the way live server keys work. You can't try the same pull over and over and over and just keep resetting the dungeon. That doesn't work on live keys. And then another thing that I wanted to mention about this, disconnect is the fact that after watching the MDI, a viewer probably doesn't have the desire to log on and try the same thing. Like if I see a Halls of a tournament where a team pulls half the dungeon, then I'm not going to be like, oh, nice, I want to log on and try the same pull, because they can't. So I think that's an issue that should be resolved, in my opinion, because that's kind of a big deal. And I think the whole purpose of the MDI existing is that it should increase the desire of the viewer to log on and play the game themselves, which just doesn't happen when what they see is completely different to what they can actually do. Then the third party would be Blizzard or the production of the MDI. Of course, there's lots of issues that the production have that I probably don't even know about, and I also can't even imagine what all of these issues can be. I'm just listing some of them. For example, Blizzard and the production need to try to make both the players and the viewers happy to have a successful show. but their interests of the player are completely different to the interests of the viewers. Sometimes they're even completely opposite of each other, making it very hard for them to achieve that. I also think that they have a difficulty of figuring out a proper schedule because of all the things they have to avoid from other Blizzard games, like patches and raids and AWC events and so on. They all have to avoid that, which can cause some issues with schedules. And then again, a bunch of other things that I probably don't know about or that are too complicated to even get into, like, broadcast days, time zones, legal issues, money, all that kind of stuff. After thinking about these concerns, I actually came up with a format that might address most of these issues. But before I go into this format idea, I do want to talk quickly about why class bans don't work, because I already know that my comments below are just going to be like, oh, just, give them class bans and everything will be resolved. I just quickly want to tell you guys why class bans are impossible with the current system of the MDI. So the way the MDI works is that teams know which dungeon they are going to play in the tournament, and they practice those exact dungeon with those exact affixes over and over and over and over, and they plan every single pull in complete detail. They know exactly when someone is using the AoE stun, when someone is using their cooldowns, when someone is using their health pot, and so on, right? So a class ban would be impossible for the teams to practice around, because all of a sudden they would have to practice a dungeon with one setup, but then they would also have to try it with a different tank, because maybe the tank gets banned, and then they have to practice the same dungeon with a different damage dealer because maybe the mage gets banned, and so on, right? And it would be too complicated for the teams to practice around that, and we would just see complete fiestas probably if they didn't practice something at all. So let's say you ban their healer and they didn't expect that, then they will just have a complete fiesta and they won't be able to execute their strategy, and it will just not be fun to watch. But yeah, just moving on about my idea. First, I also want to give a shout out to JB, because I actually saw his ideas about the MDI, and he had an idea about a point system, and I'm actually applying that point system that he had an idea about into the idea that I had. So the point system is JB's idea, all right? Okay, so my idea is that this is about the cup and the tournament itself, no time trials, nothing, okay? So my idea is that the dungeons, the levels, and the affixes that the teams are going to play are predetermined but unknown to the teams. So they only should be using affix combinations that are also in the rotation on live servers. So don't combine affixes that we never have on live servers. Also, the level of the key should be within a certain range that can be determined by Blizzard that also is announced. Okay, so let's say the key level is between 15 and 20, or it can also be lower between 14 and 18. Doesn't matter, whatever works best. Just find a range of levels and then just any level between. Then they announce the dungeon, the affix, and the level to the teams during the tournament, and the teams now have approximately 5 minutes to figure out what comp and route they want to play. All right, 5 minutes, I guess it can also be longer or less long depending on, you have to think about broadcast days, right? Because you can't fill for too long, it might get boring. And you also have to think about the teams needing enough time to log on different characters and to figure out a route. Then each series consists of 2 dungeons. The total time needed to complete the 2 dungeons will be added up, and the winner will be the team with the lower cumulative time. So there will not be a best of 3, but each teams will play 2 dungeons against each other, and whichever team needs less time in total wins. Now the time trials would be each team only has 2 tries for each dungeon. Practicing is only allowed up until the point of the announcement of the affixes and level and dungeon. And then each key will be announced officially. So basically Blizzard says, here are the affixes and the level and the dungeon at a certain time on a certain day, and people can practice up until that point. So they can practice before knowing the level and the dungeon. They can practice random keys, random affix combinations, random dungeons, and then once Blizzard announces the key, they cannot practice anymore. They only have the official 2 tries for each dungeon. I'm giving them 2 tries in the time trials because the time trials could, they could have disconnects or whatever happening. So I would say 2 tries for each dungeon would be best. I don't want to give too many tries because otherwise we're going to have the same issue again of people just over practicing stuff and doing whatever, right? So 2 tries for each dungeon and like 3 dungeons in total, or however many would work. You could even increase the amount of dungeons for the time trials to make sure that the best actually do get into the tournament. Because if you only have 2 tries for each dungeon, then I assume even more than 3 dungeons would be fine. But that's something that can be changed, of course. Now, so this was the format, and now I'm going to explain why I want this to be the case and how this would all work and what the pros and cons of this would be. All right, so first of all, the players couldn't really practice the exact dungeons anymore because of the randomness of the levels and affixes. So it will reduce the amount of like secret play the teams have to do. Means they can spend more time streaming, they can spend more time actually playing live servers and so on. And it will increase the importance of live server play to increase a team's synergy, increase your experience together with all kinds of affix combos and key levels, all kinds of different routes, and so on, right? So I do think for the players, this would be similar to like something, let's say Arena. If you're participating in the AWC, then the arenas you play on live servers, they do matter for your experience in the AWC, right? It's not the same thing, of course, but it definitely helps you. And I think it would be very important for that to be the case for the MDI too, that the keys that you play in live servers actually carry over to the MDI. And I do think this change would cause that, because you cannot practice huge, insane pulls anymore where you plan every detail. You need to know all of the different dungeons as properly, each different route you can play, each affix combination, each level of the key. So that's why I think that live server keys would be more important. And then I also think that it would change the way live server keys would be played for the high and plus community as well, because at the moment the high and plus community only plays during certain affix weeks where it's like fortified, and they don't play during tyrannical because you can't do higher keys. But because this is important now to know all affix combinations well, you can't just ignore tyrannical affix combinations. You still have to practice those too, because you can have those in the MDI, and therefore it will increase the importance of playing during all affix weeks, not just certain ones. Then the comps that teams will play will be slightly more diverse, in my opinion, because teams can't plan every small detail of each pull anymore, and therefore there will be more comfort picks and different kinds of comps can be viable, right? You don't have to play like a certain comp to be able to do the dungeons well executed and fast. There can be lots of different comps, kind of like we see on live keys. When you see on live keys, there's a bunch of different variations of comps that work. So I do think that it will be nicer for the viewers, because all of a sudden we see one comp playing against a completely different comp, and then we can talk about the differences. So let's say, oh, this team has a Resto Druid, and because they have the Resto Druid, they can do this, while the other team has a Holy Paladin, and because they have the Holy Paladin, they're allowed to do I don't know what, right? So you can talk about the differences between comps and why they're choosing what, and how this changes their approach to the dungeon, which would make it more interesting to the viewer, in my opinion. I do think there's, of course, still going to be a meta. Like, of course, there will be a mage in every team, but at least it will be slightly more diverse than what we see now, which is, I do think, the biggest issue that the viewers have. The viewers have the issue that there's one comp playing against the exact same comp, right? And I think this format would change that. So you might have like a different healer sometimes, or a different third damage dealer, or sometimes even a different tank between the two teams, right? Anyway, because of the reduced practice, there will be smaller pulls, of course, but a well-synergized team can still risk a bigger pull to get an advantage over another team just pulling slowly, especially if they get continuous practice throughout the season on different kinds of keys, right? So again, I think the importance of just practicing on live servers now will actually be increased, because they remember, oh, do you remember last time when we played this on live server, we did this and it worked really well, and then they can, put it into play on the MDI as well. And then viewers will be able to relate a lot more to the MDI, because now the teams are actually doing stuff that they themselves could theoretically replicate. There won't be any more super insane pulls that need to be practiced over and over in every small detail. So after watching the MDI, the viewer might actually want to log on and try some of these pulls themselves, right? They could be like, oh, cool, they're pulling this mob over to this other pack. That's actually something I've never thought about before. This is something I could do as well, right? I think it will be a lot more relatable for the viewer. It will be a lot more understandable too. They won't be seeing those insane big pools and not even understanding the complexity of it. The smaller pools are not necessarily worse, because I know some people are concerned that with smaller pools it would be less interesting to watch. But I disagree. I actually think it will be more relatable to watch. There will be less of a disconnect between the MDI and actual live server and Plus, and therefore, because of this increased relatability, I do think it will be more interesting to watch for the viewer, in my opinion. Then, broadcast days should be similar length to what we have now, because each team only plays 2 dungeons instead of best of 3s. So even if the dungeon will take longer, because of the smaller pools, right? There won't be any 3-game series anymore. Now, if this is not the case, like if it's actually going to be, if each series will take a lot longer, then they could theoretically decrease the range of keys to stop that from happening. So instead of playing between 15 and 20, you could play between 13 and 17 or something like that. Then I also think this will be less one-sided, because even if a team makes a big mistake in the first dungeon and falls a few minutes behind, the same thing can happen to the other team in the second dungeon, because the reduced capability of planning things ahead opens up a lot more possibilities of things that can go wrong, in my opinion. So I do think when we have these like scripted runs, speed runs, like we have in the MDI right now, if something goes completely wrong for one team, then it's very unlikely that the other team will make some huge mistake on their side, because they know, oh, we don't have to do those like super insane pulls anymore. We can just go a little bit slower and they can make up for it. But if this is the new format where they don't know the pulls beforehand, then all of a sudden everything can kind of go wrong for each team, because there's so much more variability, there's so much more RNG to what's going on, because they didn't plan every single detail. So everything can kind of go wrong at any point in the dungeon, making it a lot more exciting, in my opinion, between the two teams. But that's something we would have to see, right? So anyway, this would be a complete change of the format, obviously. This would be no more speed running. This would be more of a who is more consistent, who can be as efficient as possible, who is synergizing better, and so on. And maybe a lot of people completely disagree with this format idea, or some people completely disagree with the format having to change at all. I mean, I like the way the MDI is right now. I actually like watching speedruns. I think it's really exciting to watch speedruns and to see those big pulls and all that kind of stuff. I personally completely love the MDI at the way it is right now. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying that something needs to change, but I've heard all of these concerns of the viewers and I understand them. Like, I understand the concerns that players have and I understand the concerns that viewers have. So maybe a format change like this would be beneficial for everyone involved. Let me know what you guys think about this. This was basically my whole thought about the whole thing, and I would kind of like to know what you think about this. Maybe you have a better idea. Maybe you think some of this is not actually going to work the way I said it would work, because that's totally possible, right? I'm just theorizing on how this would end up looking like, but maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe it would look completely different and the live server still wouldn't matter at all. Who knows? Just let me know, what do you think, your ideas about the MDI, and if you like watching it the way it is. Do you like the changes that I'm suggesting? Just let me know in the comments below. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope my thoughts were somehow cohesive and you could understand by me reading off a script. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. And I'm going to see you in the next video, alright? Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And ring the bell so you can get a notification whenever a new video like this is being posted. And sometimes you can hop over to my stream over at twitch.tv Naguura if you want to watch me play live and ask me any questions there as well. Alright, have a nice rest of your day, guys, and goodbye!